The forest has the patience of a clock that will not be wound. I learned to read its patience like a ledger, each attempt to leave tallied under a small private pain. Once I found a path between birches that smelled of river and old paper, and I walked it until the roots braided into a knot that would not loosen. I had jars at my hip then, humming with captive lantern light. The glass grip pulsed like a heartbeat, and when the path folded, their glow thinned to ember. I stood on a seam of the world and thought, perhaps the forest only wishes to be kept whole, and I am the stitch. I have tried to leave more times than I have allowed anyone to know, and each failure is a small education in what the forest is willing to return. The first time I crossed the birches, I remember thinking the sky had a wrongness, as if someone had repainted the blue. By the time I reached the lane where steam rose from bowls and the scent of spice promised another life, the names I had memorized blurred like wet ink. A single thread survived, the smell of warm bread, and the rest unraveled until the lane was a rumor and the cottage threshold stood patient beneath my damp palms. Another night, I followed a bright clearing, footsteps feather light across moss, and woke to rain stinging my face with no memory of the step that brought me home. The forest is not a jailer with keys and blocks, but a cartographer of urgencies. It rearranges when it senses the map in my hands slipping. Its ruthlessness is small and clever. Fog that thickens into cloth, roots that lift to trip more than feet, echoes that pull my thoughts backward like tide. With each attempt, I pay a levy. Names of streets I almost learned. Faces in upstairs windows I would never greet. A taste of the ocean once, that vanished until I could only remember the cold. I keep a ledger of these losses carved into the underside of my workbench. Tiny notches, proof that my wanting carved its own scars. I have learned tricks of careful leaving, wrapping jars tighter, whispering the old chants, knotting acorns with talismans so their light resists fainting. Still, there are nights when the thought of the world beyond the roots rises in me like heat, uncontainable and bright, and I almost believe I could walk away without cost. The truth is harsher and quieter. Every step outward loosens the lantern's hold on the souls they carry, and with each loosening, a life inside the glass grows thinner. I have become an archivist of light, each jar a reliquary, each hollowed acorn a book of bone-thin sentences that tell who had been. I keep them neat. I polish the glass until the fireflies appear to be swimming in rivers of stars. I speak softly to them because my voice seems to steady their wings. The thought of releasing them raw into an unready night leaves my palms clammy. I imagine them scattering and forgetting the stories they carried, lost like mouthfuls of ash. And yet I hunger for rain on my face that is not the forest's breath, for the clumsy human warmth of bakery light and the blunt humor of strangers. I am a woman who tends ghosts and dreams of soup. So I try again and again, studying the map of refusals as if it were scripture. Where fog gathers more thickly. What moonless nights the paths most cleverly knot. I learned that beginnings matter. Leave at the bell of midnight and the forest will recast your intention into a loop. But leave at the thin hour of pre-dawn and the roots have not yet rehearsed their misdirection. Once I almost made it to the hedge that hid the village. I had chosen my hour and held my breath like a vow. At the entrance, breath like thin smoke, my memories thinned like poor lantern oil, faces unstitched from the fabric of my days until only hunger and a stray scent of bread remained. That is the grief of my life. The cost of wanting is exacted not always by thunder, but by forgetting. Over time, I learned to accommodate the forest's will. I let it insist on my presence. I tend because tending is also a kind of keeping, of histories, of small mercies recorded in jars, each light given a name in my soft ledger. Sometimes forgiveness hums in the glass, a thin, sure note that says the lives inside do not mind being kept. Sometimes I am not so sure. There are nights I imagine walking away and releasing everything, letting memory dissolve into wind and river, trusting that forgetting might be kinder than endless clutching. But then I see a tiny wing flitter in its prison, and remember the promise I murmured in ink that has since faded. One day, a successor will arrive. In the end, perhaps the forest and I are not enemies, but co-conspirators in a long, difficult mercy. The ledger of my attempts is not merely a list of failures. It is a map of the price of refusal, bound to keep what others discard. If there is a moral to the way I count my losses and keep my lights, it is this. To steward another's memory is not always an act of salvation. Sometimes it is sacrifice. Sometimes it is love. Often it is both. Hold what you must, but learn the cost. Learn when a hand on the jar is a blessing, and when it becomes the thing that closes the world. I continue tomorrow, as always, polishing glass until the fireflies think they are constellations, and humming the old chants beneath my breath. I keep the ledger close, and the jar lights closer. And I listen for the rustle that might be freedom, or merely another way the dark asks me to stay. If at last I am allowed to leave, I will walk out with clean hands and a story ready to be set down. Until then, I will tend, and in tending, I will remember why memory must sometimes be set free, and why some lights must be carried until someone wiser comes to take them. Let the forest teach its patience. Let my hands learn the price of holding. The rest will follow in its own time.